supplementary IPE revision. So in the previous session, that is in last session, we have discussed some important IPE SAQs, that is short answer questions. Yesterday we have covered IPE questions of endocrine system and chemical coordination, and in that chapter one SAQ is left over, important SAQ. That SAQ we will discuss today, and along with that SAQ, even in immune system. So generally in every question paper, actually from immune system chapter also, at least one SAQ they are asking. So that's why in immune system, whatever the important SAQs are there, so that also we are going to cover today. So let us see now. First, the SAQ of endocrine system and chemical coordination, whatever left over. Yesterday, I have told in the chapter differences between Addison's disease and then Cushing syndrome, right? So like that, some of the important SAQs we have seen. Secretions of pituitary gland we have discussed. So now today, in today's session, let us discuss about hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. So what is this hypothyroidism and then hyperthyroidism? Hypo, the name itself indicates. Hypo means low. Thyroidism, secretions of thyroid gland. So whenever the secretions of thyroid gland are low, that means whatever required, when compared to whatever required, if it is secreting in very less quantity, then that will lead to what? So that will lead to hypothyroidism. In hypothyroidism, again, we are having different types of diseases. Like, for example, if hypothyroidism is because of what? Because of the deficiency of iodine. If hypothyroidism is because of deficiency of iodine. So because if you take thyroid hormones, so thyroid hormones are T3 and T4 hormones. T3 means triiodothyronin. Triiodothyronin. And T4 means tetraiodothyronin. The name itself indicates that triiodothyronin contains 3 iodine molecules in the structure, and whereas tetraiodothyronin contains 4 iodines in its structure, right? So that means with this one can understand that for the synthesis of the thyroid hormones, iodine is essential. So, but whatever the iodine we take generally through our diet, iodine should be taken only through diet. So that's why you know that iodized salt is advisable because of the deficiency of the iodine. So many people are getting this hypothyroidism. So in order to avoid that, nowadays everywhere, so you know that particularly in ads and all, or doctors, generally they recommend iodized salt. So that means iodine is rarely present, or it is present only in some kinds of foods, and taking only that particular foods we can get iodine. Okay, so that's why deficiency of iodine, generally it will lead to what? It will lead to simple goiter, because whenever iodine is not there in sufficient amount, then this T3 and T4 hormones are produced in low amount. They are synthesized in very low quantity. So that what will happen? It will lead to a condition called as simple goiter. So what is the characteristic of simple goiter? We can see swelling of the neck. You know, the thyroid gland is present in the neck region. Thyroid gland, a butterfly shaped gland, which is present in the neck region. Okay. So now what will happen? This thyroid gland, it will be swelling, and because of that, the entire neck appears to be swelled up. So it results in swelling of the neck region. The main characteristic symptom is swelling of neck region. So like this, deficiency of iodine mainly leads to simple goiter, where the characteristic feature is swelling of neck region. So this is one thing in hypothyroidism. Whereas hypothyroidism during pregnancy, it will lead to cretinism. It will lead to what? Cretinism. Hypothyroidism during pregnancy leads to cretinism. And what are the characteristic features? So the baby, whatever growing. So if the mother during pregnancy condition, if she gets hypothyroidism, that is only called as cretinism. So that which leads to what? Impairment or stunted physical and mental growth. Stunted physical and mental growth of baby. Stunted physical and mental growth of baby. And baby, whatever born because of this hypothyroidism during pregnancy condition in mother. So they will have low IQ. Such kind of babies will have low IQ. Then mental retardation, etc. Okay. So they will have stunted physical and mental growth of the baby. That means the baby is not grown completely. And the baby born will be with low IQ, mental retardation, and even you can include deaf mutism. So that means they can't speak and they can't hear. They can't speak and hear. So the symptoms are stunted physical and mental growth of the baby. And the baby is born will be with low IQ, mental retardation, and then deaf mutism. So this is during pregnancy condition, which is called as cretinism. And whereas hypothyroidism in adults, so hypothyroidism in case of adults, it leads to a condition called as myxedema. It leads to a condition called as myxedema. So if hypothyroidism is seen in case of the adults, that condition is called as what? Myxedema, where the characteristic symptoms are lethargy. Lethargy means inactive, sensitivity to cold. Sensitivity to cold, that means very frequently they will be getting infections, cold infections. Sensitivity to cold, mental impairment, and puffiness in the face. So puffiness, that means the body would be showing swelling. So puffiness, all these are the characteristic symptoms of myxedema. And whereas in case of women, this hypothyroidism will lead to irregular menstrual cycles. Menstrual cycles will not be regular. The periods will not be regular. So this is only called as irregular menstrual cycle. So in case of women, they lead to what? Irregular menstrual cycles. So these are the different types of hypothyroidism. So hypothyroidism, if it is because of deficiency of iodine, it leads to simple goiter, where the characteristic symptom is swelling of thyroid gland. And hypothyroidism during pregnancy condition is called as cretinism. So where the baby will be having stunted physical and mental growth, and the baby born will be with low IQ, mental retardation, and then deaf mutism. And hypothyroidism in case of adults is called as myxedema, where the symptoms are lethargy, sensitivity to cold, mental impairment, and puffiness in the face and other parts of the body. And whereas in case of the woman, hypothyroidism, mainly it will lead to irregular menses. So all these you should remember and write. 3 things you should remember: simple goiter, cretinism, myxedema. Simple goiter, cretinism, and then myxedema. So now let us go with hyperthyroidism. So hyperthyroidism, the name itself indicates that hyper means high secretions of thyroid gland or high activity of thyroid gland. So hyperthyroidism is because of hyperactivity of thyroid gland, or due to cancer of thyroid gland, or due to cancer in thyroid gland, or even it is also because of development of nodules, development of certain nodules in thyroid gland. So hyperthyroidism is because of hyperactivity of thyroid gland, cancer in thyroid gland, and development of nodules in thyroid gland. So this hyperthyroidism, mainly in case of adults, it leads to a condition called as Graves' disease, or it can also be called as exophthalmic goiter. Graves' disease or exophthalmic goiter. So the name itself indicates that exophthalmic. Ophthalmic means what? Eyes. So that means we can see protrusion of eyeballs. The eyeballs would be almost, like bulged out. The eyeballs are bulged out. So where sometimes we feel scary to see their eyes. So the eyeballs are protruded out. The main characteristic symptom is eyeballs are protruded out. And other features, other characteristic symptoms which they are having are increased metabolic activity, increased metabolic activity, increased heartbeat, and more sweating. Profuse sweating or more sweating can be seen in them. So these are the symptoms of Graves' disease or exophthalmic goiter, where we can see protrusion of the eyeballs, increased metabolic activity, and then increased activity of heartbeat and more sweating. So hyperthyroidism is because of what? Hyperactivity of thyroid gland. Then it is due to cancer in thyroid gland or development of nodules in thyroid gland. And the characteristic disease is what? Graves' disease or exophthalmic goiter. Hyperthyroidism in adults cause Graves' disease or exophthalmic goiter. So where the symptoms are, eyeballs are protruded out, increased metabolic activity, increased rate of heartbeat, and then more sweating. So this is about hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. Hypothyroidism, simple goiter, cretinism, myxedema. Hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease or exophthalmic goiter. So hope that you have understood this SAQ. Now let us go with some important SAQs of immune system chapter. Some important SAQs of immune system. So in immune system chapter, B cells question. Write a short note on B cells. That is important question. And even the structure of immunoglobulin. So that is also very, very important question. So 2 questions. Most important, B cells and structure of immunoglobulin. So the question is, write a short note on B cells. So what are B cells? So here almost like some 8 or 9 points you need to cover, as it is a 4-mark question. So what are B cells? So B cells are a type of lymphocytes. B cells are a type of lymphocytes. So the lymphocytes that which release antibodies or that which secrete antibodies. B cells are a type of lymphocytes that which release antibodies that which engulf the antigen, or that which will neutralize the activity of antigen. Antigen is a part of pathogen that which enters into our body, foreign organism. Like for example, if a bacteria enters into the body, complete bacteria will not cause the disease. Only a specific part of the bacteria or a specific part of the virus is responsible for causing the disease. And to that specific part, whichever will go and bind from our immune system and neutralize the activity of that, means inactivating the antigen. So such kind of structures are only called as antibodies, and that antibodies are secreted by a type of lymphocytes called as B cells. So you would be already knowing that lymphocytes are a type of WBC, white blood cells. So generally white blood cells only act as immune cells. And this B cells or the lymphocytes, mainly they are produced where? So the next point what you should focus is where they are produced. So they are produced in the bone marrow of adults. In case of adults, they are produced in the bone marrow. And whereas in fetal condition, they are produced in liver. So that means when we are as fetus, lymphocytes are produced in fetus. And whereas in case of birds, they are produced in a structure called as bursa of fabricus. So the B lymphocytes are produced in bursa of fabricus in birds. So this is important point. So B cells, where they are produced. So B cells are produced in bone marrow of adults, and in case of fetus, in the liver, and in birds, it is produced in bursa of fabricus. Then this B lymphocytes, they are called as immunocompetent cells. So these B cells or B lymphocytes can be called as immunocompetent competent cells. Why they are called as immunocompetent cells? Because they are secreting antibodies that which will fight with antigen. Okay, that which will fight with antigen. That means they are competitive enough. So why they are called as immunocompetent cells means because they are secreting antibodies that which are fighting or that which are competing with antigen and try to eliminate the antigen from the body. So that's why these B cells are called as what? They are called as immunocompetent cells. And B cells will become effector cells. B cells will become effector cells when they enter into secondary lymphoid organs. The B cells will act as effector cells when they enter into secondary lymphoid organs. So actually in our immune system, there are two types of lymphoid organs, primary lymphoid organs and secondary lymphoid organs. So primary lymphoid organs are those where the lymphocytes are produced and matured. So they are produced and matured, like bone marrow, thymus. So like this, no? These are called as bone marrow and thymus are called as primary lymphoid organs. And what are secondary lymphoid organs? After getting matured in the primary lymphoid organs, now these lymphocytes, they will move to secondary lymphoid organs where they will become effector cells. So that means they are ready with the weapons to fight with the antigen or to fight with the pathogen and try to eliminate from the body. So that fighting capacity, so becoming functional, becoming effector. So that capacity will come only when they enter into secondary lymphoid organs. So it is something like, so the primary lymphoid organs are your intermediate colleges. So where you are taking a specific course, okay? And when you pass, when you get good score, so you will be writing your NEET examination. And when you pass in that, when you get very good percentage, very good, where you can qualify the seat. So what happens? You will go to medical college where you will become a doctor. So that means it is something like you are becoming functional now. So if you get qualified in the MBBS, it is something like you are becoming effector cells. So that means you are ready with all your tools. So to act as a doctor, so to go for surgeries in such a way, here also the effector cells. So when they enter into secondary lymphoid organs only, they can act as what? They will be acting as effector cells. So when they act as effector cells here, in two ways they will be acting as effector cells. So what are they? So one are short-lived plasma cells. Short-lived plasma cells. And the other one is long-lived memory cells. Short-lived plasma cells and the other one is long-lived memory cells. So short-lived plasma cells. So that means the B lymphocytes only, when they enter into secondary lymphoid organ, they are getting differentiated into two types of cells. One is plasma cell and the other one is what? Memory cell. So these plasma cells are short-lived where they secrete antibodies. So the plasma cells only secrete antibodies, and whereas other type of cells are long-lived memory cells. So these memory cells immediately they won't secrete antibody. So they will be memory. They'll be recognizing what is the antigen that which has entered into the body. Okay, and they will be stored in the blood. Again, next time if the same antigen encounters the body, then they will recognize that antigen, and immediately now, before that pathogen causes the disease, now these memory cells will be differentiated into plasma cells and secrete antibodies and fight with them in an effective way. So that's why, generally certain diseases, once you get in your lifetime, you won't get them back again. For example, smallpox. Smallpox, once you get in your lifetime, imagine that you got smallpox. Okay, you have suffered from the disease. So during that time, what happens? T lymphocytes, by entering into secondary lymphoid organs, they differentiate into plasma cells and then memory cells. So plasma cells will secrete antibody and try to fight with that smallpox virus. But smallpox virus, whatever entered, it is more active and more energetic when compared to your immune cells. That's why you got the disease. But however, the memory cells are also stored in your blood. So that what happens, imagine that after 5 years or 10 years, again, same kind of smallpox virus, when it enters into your body, Now this time you won't get the smallpox disease because you developed immunity. What is that immunity? Immunity in the form of memory cells you develop. So this memory cells, now immediately it will recognize, okay, before 5 years, same virus has entered into the body. Like that it will recognize. So it will recognize, and before that smallpox virus multiply and cause the disease, now this memory cells, again they turn back into plasma cells and secrete antibodies and fight with that virus and try to eliminate before it causes the disease. So that is only called as immunity. Developing immunity is nothing but, so storing antibodies are mainly memory cells, because antibodies are also short-lived. Antibodies are also short-lived. So that's why generally our immunity is stored in the form of memory cells only. So like this, the B cells, after entering into secondary lymphoid organs, they will be differentiated into two types of cells. That is short-lived plasma cells, where they secrete antibodies, and long-lived memory cells, that which will remember the antigen. That which will remember the antigen. And one more thing, sometimes no, in B cells, whatever the antibodies that which are secreted, so they will be present on the membrane itself. They will be present on the membrane of the B cells itself. Okay, whatever the antibodies which are secreted, they are present on the membrane itself until and unless they identify a specific antigen. So like this, all these are the different points which you should remember and write about B cells. So first point what you write is, B cells are a type of lymphocytes which secrete antibodies that which will react with antigen. Then where the B cells are produced. So B cells are produced in bone marrow of adults, and in case of whenever they are in fetal condition, they are secreted in liver. In birds, they are secreted in bursa of fabricus. And these B cells are immunocompetent cells because they are secreting antibodies that which are fighting with antigen. And even these B cells are called as effector cells when they enter into secondary lymphoid organs, because they are producing two types of cells. One is short-lived plasma cells, that which secrete antibodies, and the other are long-lived memory cells, that which can remember antigen and fight with the antigen. And B cells, whatever the antibodies they secrete, so generally they'll be present on the membrane itself sometimes. So this is about B cells. Hope that it is clear for you. And if you have any doubts, last 10 minutes, I'll be giving time for you. So let me complete one more question. One more SAQ also let me complete, very important SAQ, that is structure of immunoglobulins. So structure of immunoglobulins. So immunoglobulins are nothing but antibodies only. Other name for antibodies are immunoglobulins. So why they are called as immunoglobulins means, because antibodies are responsible for providing the immunity, and even they are a type of proteins called as globulin proteins. Actually, we have different types of proteins, no? Albumins, globulins, blood clotting proteins, like that, right? So in that they are type of globulins. So next question is, write a short note on immunoglobulins. So immunoglobulins are nothing but antibodies that which are secreted by B lymphocytes, and these B lymphocytes, whatever the antibodies they are secreting, so they bind with antigen and neutralize the activity of antigen. So they neutralize the effect of antigen so that you won't get the disease. And specifically in case of this antibody, there is a site called as paratope or antigen binding site. So where exactly antibody will bind to antigen means paratope or antigen binding site. So specifically in the antibody, antigen will bind in a site called as what? Paratope or antigen binding site. Now let us see the structure of immunoglobulin so that you can understand. Actually, coming to the structure of immunoglobulin, as I told you, immunoglobulins are nothing but proteins. Antibodies are nothing but proteins. So they are made up of with polypeptide chains. So totally 4 polypeptide chains are there in a immunoglobulin. So they are made up of with how many polypeptide chains? 4 polypeptide chains. In that, 2 are heavy chains and 2 are light chains. In that, 2 are heavy chains and then 2 are light chains, so that it can be represented as H2L2. So that's why generally the structure of immunoglobulin, it can be represented as what? H2L2. So as I told you, the structure of immunoglobulin, when you see, it consists of 2 heavy chains like this and 2 light chains. So 2 heavy chains and then 2 light chains. And the heavy chains and the light chains both are joined together by means of what? Disulfide bonds. So the 2 heavy chains are joined by disulfide bond, and even heavy chain and light chains are also joined by disulfide bond. So this is one heavy chain and this is light chain. This is one heavy chain and this is light chain. And the 2 heavy chains are joined by disulfide bonds. And heavy chain and light chain are also joined by disulfide bonds. And specifically the site present in the immunoglobulin, that which binds to antigen. So this is only called as antigen binding site. So antigen binding site in antibody. So this is only called as paratope. This is only called as paratope. So there are 2 kinds of regions in immunoglobulin. What are they? One is antigen binding site or paratope, which can be represented as FP region. On the other region, apart from this paratope, whatever the remaining region is present. So this entire region is called as FC region. Okay, FC region means what? Crystallizable or cell binding region. And whereas FP region is nothing but paratope or antigen binding site. Paratope or antigen binding site. So like this, coming, if you consider the structure of the immunoglobulin or antibody, every immunoglobulin is made up of with 4 polypeptide chains. In that, 2 are light chains and 2 are heavy chains. So that's why immunoglobulin can be represented as H2L2. And in immunoglobulin, heavy chains and light chains are binded together by means of disulfide bonds. And the specific region in immunoglobulin where the antigen comes and binds is only called as paratope or antigen binding site, which can be called as FP region. And the remaining part of the immunoglobulin is called as FC region, which is called as crystallizable or cell binding region. And there are different types of immunoglobulins. Antibodies are of different types. So that's why it is specific immunity. So different types of immunoglobulins are present. So what are different types of immunoglobulins? So there are 5 different types of immunoglobulins like IgA. What is Ig? Immunoglobulin. Immunoglobulin A type, IgG type, IgD type, IgE type, and IgM type. Each type of antibody will exhibit a specific type of immunity. So there are different types of antibodies: IgA, IgG, IgD, IgE, and then IgM. So like this, totally there are 5 specific antibodies. 5 specific type of antibodies are present. And again, based upon mobility, antibodies are of 2 types. One is pre-circulating antibodies. So that means these antibodies, once they are secreted from B lymphocytes, they will be moving freely in the plasma or blood. They will be moving freely in the plasma. And the other type of antibodies are binding antibodies. So that means these antibodies are present on the membrane of B cells only. So they are present on the membrane of B cells only. Clear, understood? Like this, there are two types of antibodies. One is free circulating antibodies, where they will be moving freely in the blood or plasma of blood. And whereas other type of antibodies are bounded antibodies. So where these antibodies are attached to the membrane of B cells or to the macrophages, something like that. So this is about the structure of immunoglobulin. So immunoglobulins are antibodies only, which are secreted by B lymphocytes. And the B lymphocytes, by secreting this antibody, the antibodies will specifically bind with antigen, specific antigen, and tries to neutralize the effect of the antigen. And there are two sites in case of antibodies. One is FP site and the other one is FC site. FP site is paratope binding site or antigen binding site, where specifically that part will bind to the antigen. And whereas the remaining part is called as FC region, that is cell binding, where it will be binding to the B cell only, as I told you. So B lymphocyte only. It will be sticking to the membrane of the B cell only. And the structure of the immunoglobulin is made up of totally with 4 polypeptide chains. In the 2 are heavy chains and 2 are light chains. And it can be represented as H2L2. And there are different types of immunoglobulins like IgA, IgG, IgD, IgE, and then IgM. And again, based upon mobility, there are 2 types of antibodies: free circulating antibodies, binding antibodies. So free circulating antibodies are those which are moving freely in plasma, and binding antibodies are those which are sticked or attached to the membrane of the B cells. So mainly in immune system, learn these 2 questions. One is write a short note on B cells, and the other one is structure of immunoglobulins. So these are more important. And if time is there, then you go with mechanism of humoral immunity and how HIV virus multiply in AIDS. Otherwise, these 2 questions are enough. B cells and then immunoglobulins is enough. And I heard that you people have some queries, some doubts. So in today's session, we have learned 3 SAQs, right? One is hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism. Another one is B cells and immunoglobulins. So whatever queries or doubts you have, now you can discuss with me. If you raise your hand, sir will unmute you. And in next session, we will go with the remaining short answer questions from genetics, evolution. We will cover them. Okay. So it's time for doubt session now. You can raise your hand.